Hello everyone. Wow, today's episode of Lifting Your Spirits is quite special. Mark Reeder is my guest, and yeah, there's just a little bit of an introduction needed, I would say, for those of you that don't know him. We had a great chat. There was loads of stuff that I wanted to talk to him about, but I just didn't get round to it because, well, I kind of like to keep the podcast at like 50 minutes. This went over a little bit. But we just had such good chats, man. He's such a nice, charming guy, and really easy to talk to. He's from Manchester, proper working class, and he landed in Berlin back in 1978 as Factory Records, kind of German ambassador. Factory Records were responsible for Joy Division, Happy Mondays, New Order, and he was a real, and still is, like a real proper influence on the Berlin music scene. He will not admit this himself because he's too modest and humble, but you know, he kind of like he done a lot for the punk scene in the early to late 80s, mid to late 80s, introducing punk from the West into East Berlin, which is a huge feat because punk was, you know, properly not, anti-establishment was not a thing in the East, and well, he made that happen. He had a couple of bands. One is called Die Unbekannten. They're brilliant. If you're into kind of post-punk, go check them out. Yeah, we talk about loads of stuff, man. We talk about, you know, the time that he organised Joy Division's only gig in Berlin, and about, you know, 50 odd people turned up, but it was great nevertheless. We talk about his tours with New Order, what he's up to now, and I really did want to get round to the kind of latest, biggest thing that he's done, and that was 2016 roughly. He starred in and made a movie called B-Movie, Lost and Sound, which I think is a little play on Lost and Found. Go check it out. You can rent it on YouTube and stuff. But basically what we covered was basically what actually goes on in the film, and it was great. I got some proper, amazing, great gems from him that haven't been discussed or talked about in other interviews that he's done. And it was just really, really nice. I was really relaxed with him. He didn't want a cocktail. He doesn't really drink, and he's not a fan of sugar or fruit or citrus. So I couldn't really do much with an alcohol-free cocktail. So we had a cup of tea, and I thought it was nice. So I'm going to show you how to make a cup of tea. Yeah, you know the score. If you like what you see, you hear, head over to buymeacoffee.com. The link will be in your peripherals, and yeah, feel free to support me. I mean, I know it's only €3, but you know, every little helps. So this one's a good one. Enjoy it. Cheers. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lifting Your Spirits, where I show you how to make a brilliant professional cocktail, and then I take that cocktail to my guest who's waiting in the West Wings. Now, my guest today doesn't really want to drink alcohol, and he's not a big fan of sugar or citrus or fruit, so kind of difficult to make a non-alcoholic cocktail, but what he does like is tea. I'm going to show you how to make a cup of tea.
Where can I get myself a drink?
So look, I'm going to show you how to make a proper British cup of tea, right? Not mint in hot water or ginger in hot water. Also tasty, but not tea. First thing you need, a cup. I prefer to use the Wandering Barman cup. Now comes the tea. Everyone has their own blend, which is fair enough. Each to their own, right? I use PG Tips. And what PG Tips have these days is science. They come in little triangle tea bags, right? not your traditional two-sided, front and back. I feel that the pyramid bag gives more room for blendage into your warm water. Okay, on that note, if you're going to put your hot water in first and then your tea bag, you can switch off right now. Switch off right now. Empty cup, tea bag, in. Next thing, hot water. Start boiling your kettle. It takes a minute. We take our boiling hot water, careful, and we pour nice and gently over the cup of tea. And we fill it to about just over 3/4. And then we safely put the kettle back in its stand. Don't believe in it just randomly around the kitchen for someone else to put it back in its stand. Now, amateur tea makers do this all the time. They get a spoon and they squeeze and they press it up against the side of the cup. Just chill. Give it a minute. Let the tea do its thing. Let it get its blend. Let it move out into the hot water. Just wait. Postino di tè nero, sachet di Dinois. Tè negro. Herbata Zamna. Schwarzer Tee im Teebeutel, schwarzer Tee. Not yet. No biscuits yet. Now, tea is ready. Now, get rid of your tea bag. And now comes a little bit of milk. And we only want a little bit. You don't need to go crazy. Don't go crazy. One last final stir. Little taste. Oh my goodness. And of course, some biscuits of your choice. That, my friends, is how you successfully make a proper British cup of tea. So, let's go to my guest and bring him his cup of tea with, of course, some biscuits. Guys, my guest this week is, well, pretty much a Berlin absolute legend. He was in the band Die Unbekannten. He single-handedly allowed punk and techno to pretty much exist in Berlin. It's only Mark Reeder, everyone.
Excuse me, where can I get myself a drink?
All right, everyone, it's Mark Reeder.
Hello.
How you doing, man?
Thank you very much. So, yeah.
Let me just disrobe a bit here. Okay. Considering, has just briefly, how has the past year kind of treated you with this nonsense of life that we call?
Well, good question. I mean,
That's our microphone.
All right.
Sorry, everyone. Never sorry.
It's a good question, because at the beginning I was kind of amused, by this the actual fear factor of what this disease kind of meant to people.
Yeah.
My wife is Taiwanese, and she was onto the disease really early on, and we were watching what was happening there in East Asia, and and knowing this, this band called Stolen that I produced.
Yeah.
They're giving me this kind of like daily information about how the pandemic is unfolding in China, how it's unfolding in Taipei, which was like really swift with the lockdown and kind of like
mega,
and so I had this really early on, like in early February, and so we were kind of watching what was going on, and I was thinking, this is really gonna go a bit
like tits up, or were you?
I had this suspicion that it was, it wasn't going to be long before we were going to be feeling this thing. Although at first I was thinking, what can it be, And then it started to get worse and worse, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Like everything's locking down. All the things that we have planned are being kind of like stopped, like gigs or events. I was supposed to do all these events and stuff, and so they'll get stopped, and so you have to kind of adapt. I mean, I'm very lucky because I can work in the studio and produce music all the time, and I've been able to do that throughout this whole scenario of this lockdown. Been able to still go to the studio and still make music, and still produce things. But at the same time, like all the other events that kind of go along with that, like the B-movie gigs that I go and do and stuff. Obviously, they've kind of had to stop. Was had these plans to go to America and Canada and everything all gone. We were supposed to go to Japan and with Stolen and do some gigs there in Japan, go on a tour in New Order. All fell through, and you kind of think, well, okay, what do you do? How do you adapt? And it's all about adapting. Yeah. How we get through this and understanding what does this disease mean to us, and how. I think a lot of people just don't understand really what it means to be in this pandemic. Still don't even get the picture, of what it means. And I think that is the problem, and it'll be an ongoing problem until they finally realise and understand what they have to do. Because you just have to understand how diseases function and stuff like that. And it's like a disease could mutate itself to death and kill itself off. It could kill its host, and if it's got no other host to kind of go to, then it can't multiply itself, and all these different things. And it's like, well, how do we adapt to that?
It's just so dystopian, I feel, and like I'm like everyone else. I'm happy to go along with this journey at the best of times. And when you throw a pandemic into the mix, I'm like, all right, what do you need me to do?
Bring it on.
But
we've had. I think for our kind of like our generation, my generation certainly not, maybe certainly too, but this younger generation, the post-Second World War, post-Cold War generation, this is our Second World War kind of scenario.
A little bit.
You know what I mean? It's like my parents, they had to deal with bombs raining down on their heads every day and stuff, and the fear of like Nazi invasion and things like this, and all that kind of terrorism of the 5 years of the Second World War. And I think for people now, it's a similar kind of thing. It's a similar kind of like event, which will. We have to get over the event. We have to be victorious and get over this event.
There's one thing. There is one thing that's in common with both of those things. So I'm just going to set our little timer here for us so that we have got a better understanding of that abstract thing called time.
Which we've lost the track of.
Oh, always. Which is a good thing. Already we've lost track, Mark. It's great. One thing that I can, that is interlinked with both those examples that you gave, like bombs getting dropped and people is the kind of the loss of freedom a little bit, and it just sounds so pedantic coming from like this kind of post-Cold War generation where we're like, oh, so what did you have to sacrifice? You had to stay at home and watch Netflix, which is totally a fair enough point, because that is really all we've had to do. But at the same time, there's that lingering feeling that like, well, we can't go out. I can't do the things that I want to do. I can't experience culture, whether it's the museum or the cinema, or in my case, work. And I think that's actually something that you and I unwittingly have in common, is that we both come from very working class backgrounds, right? You come from you're Mancunian, but where's it? Brendan or something? Denton. I come from a place called Cumbernauld, which is like on the outskirts of Glasgow.
Yeah, and I was on the outskirts of Manchester.
And it's proper working class. Yeah. I always compare my life to I'm always more scared of the middle classes and them stealing my money than I am junkies stealing my money, because I'm like, I've got much more. I'm always wary of anyone who's like upper middle class or whatever. Yeah. But but just a little bit. I'm always wondering what's your angle when you really mean what you're really asking. But the point I'm trying to make is that this kind of freedom that's been taken away from work, for example, not working for 15 months. I've never been in a situation like that in my life, and I'm always very much willing to kind of like put in the graft and roll up sleeves and get it done. So despite the fact that I couldn't kind of go to museums and cultural stuff and bars and hang out with people normally in normal everyday life, it was quite difficult to kind of like sit back and just not do anything because you weren't allowed to.
But like I said, our parents had to they had a similar kind of situation. Like you had to go to the army, you had to go in the war. You had to go to another country if you were, and fight and kill people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're in a sense we're privileged because
totally,
we've got Netflix and iTunes and Spotify and all these things. And you think, well, can you imagine your lockdown if you didn't have those things? You know, it'd be much worse if you didn't have.
Absolutely.
If you didn't have any form of entertainment, you only had the lockdown, where you only had yourself to kind of contain and sort of entertain. I think, you know, we're very, very privileged that we have all these other kind of diversions, you know, compared to, you know, other places for that matter, you know, places that don't have electricity all the time.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
we're so privileged.
I know what would have happened for sure is lots of tea would have been getting drunk, both in the 40s, 50s, and here in the 2021.
Definitely.
Definitely, man. I'm really glad we're drinking tea today.
Yeah, it's nice.
I mean, it's a Sunday. It's afternoon.
Cup of biscuit.
You know what? I do want a biscuit. So what I've got chocolate digestives,
Splendid.
right? McVitie's, and also Prinsen roller. And I thought that was also adequate to have, just to kind of, you know, I'm pretty sure you've had your fair share of Prinsen rollers in the past.
Oh, I am. It's not really my favourite. The chocolate digestives, unfortunately, are very particular. I love them.
Oh, you love them?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm so glad of that. Right, I thought you were going to say I absolutely detest them.
No.
Brilliant. No, help yourself, man.
No.
So listen, I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up the fucking 5 flights of stairs that I make everyone have to climb to do this.
You have to suffer for your art.
That's to suffer for your art, man. So just on that note, would you mind just giving a little kind of rundown of like what brought you to Berlin and how you came here? I'm very much well in tuned and well versed of how, but I kind of just want a little intro for the listeners who aren't really so familiar with yourself.
All right. Well, I can't. You know, the minute I got a passport in 1976, I decided I wanted to go abroad, as we called it. You know, across the water.
Mm-hmm.
So go to France and Belgium, and whatever. And I just hitchhiked from around the coast to Dunkirk, and to see it and stuff, and then hitchhiked to Holland. And I was hitchhiking in Holland, and this guy stopped me. I'm going to Cologne. I'm like, get in the car, just go to Cologne, and where the hell's that, And I kind of got bitten by this kind of travel bug, and I thought, I realised that there's a lot of record shops here, selling records that people don't buy, like Klaus Schulze and stuff like that. I'm like, wow. And I was into that kind of music anyway, so it was kind of like a kind of double motivation to kind of go away. Initially, when I went away, I didn't think about buying records, until I actually go past the record shop and you see all these things. Sure. And it was like Aladdin's cave. It was like, wow. Mm-hmm. I have to come back again. And so I went back again and again and again. And all these times I'm thinking to myself, well, I should go to Berlin. And then David Bowie came to Berlin, did the Lone Heroes. Yeah. And it was like, there must be something. But nobody would tell you anything about, Berlin. Nobody. I didn't know anybody who'd been here.
But sorry to interject. When was Low again?
Low was 76.
76. So
yeah.
Okay.
And it was like, okay. So
you landed 78.
I came to Berlin in 78. Yeah. And I decided, I was so desperate to come, and I thought, the closer I get, I'll go there and see it, because everyone kept telling me how terrible it was. And in West Germany, when you talk to people about Berlin, they'd all kind of put you off. They didn't want you to go there.
Why are you going to that weird kind of fucked up place?
They didn't really say. It's like an occupied city surrounded by a wall in the middle of communism and stuff like that. And it just didn't. They didn't try to make it attractive, but in their attempts at trying to kind of put me off, they made me more curious and I became more intrigued. Berlin I only knew from like 60s film Cold War movies. Like The Spy Came In From the Cold, or Funeral in Berlin, or something like this. The Aquila Memorandum and all these things.
What's your man John? Is it John Le Carre?
This kind of thing. So I was like, that's all I really knew about Berlin. I didn't know anything much about it historically, and the war ended, of course, And so coming here, I actually just came to buy records. And I arrived in the city, and it was like, I arrived in the night, so I didn't really know what the city looked like. I got hitchhiked a ride, yeah. And this student guy brought me to Berlin, and we drove down the Kudamm, and it was all this kind of glittering gold and signs and everything, lights and stuff. I'm thinking, looks a bit like Dusseldorf or something like that. I didn't realise the rest of it didn't look like the Kudam, you know. And I come to Schöneberg and we go in the house and it's like night time, chucking it down with drizzling rain, you know. And he lives in this like massive apartment, 4 metre high ceiling. It's like, wow, what's this? Mm-hmm. And then he says, you can stay upstairs. This house is about to be torn down. You can stay upstairs. There's a flat free. Here's a skeleton key. Go upstairs and come into this palatial place, right? Huge, right? You know, stuck on the ceiling. You know, there's frilly bits on the ceiling and stuff, and and a balcony and a white marble bathroom. And I was like, this is, you know, I come from a council house, you know, in Manchester, you know, and it was like the ceiling's here, and I'm like, wow, and they want to tear this down. Why? It's like a palace. And I stayed there for 8 months, and it was just unbelievable.
So what were you doing then in the 8 months there? Was this, by the way, where was this? Schöneberg, did you say?
Schöneberg.
So you're just cruising the streets, trying to find your feet, learn the language, meet some people, basically?
Just going to clubs, going to places, gigs. I mean, I went to see a lot of different places, you know, like where do you look? Tip magazine, you know. Tip had just started, thankfully, actually, because we didn't have such a thing before. And so you know, I was kind of going to Metropole, you know, Nordorfplatz, to the disco, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, what is this?
Okay.
It was a gay disco, biggest gay disco in Europe, you know, and I was like, wow, this is something completely different. But I anything remotely like this in Manchester. Mm-hmm. I went to Sound Discotheque, you know, famous from Christiane F., the story of Christiane F. Went to Sound Discotheque. Not really my kind of place, but it was an introduction into what was happening. It wasn't really that much happening, to be honest. It was like the nucleus of this kind of new wave scene, which was in the sort of like in this microcosm of Schöneberg, Belzigerstrasse sort of thing. Sensor record shop and like punk house or something. There was nothing really much, you know. There were like 2 punk bands, and that's about it, you know. Good Run Gut, you know. But it started to evolve over, you know, as 78 moved into 79, and people started to become more adaptable to this idea that they can do it themselves and they don't need to conform to anything, and they don't have to make music to make hits, because, you know, that was a big difference between the German music scene of that period and what I'd experienced in Manchester working in a record shop in Virgin Records, a little small shop, not a mega store. Working in a little shop in Manchester, dealing with punk, early punk, progressive music before that, rock and stuff, and then becoming a punk mecca in Manchester. Seeing that evolve and develop, and then seeing the direction it was going in. The minute it kind of got to like Sans Plan Pour Moi from Plastic Bertrand, I kind of thought, well, that's about as far as it's going to go.
That's about as far as like independency within music is going to go, about making it your own.
Well, it was like the fact that when punk started, it was the realisation that you could do it yourself. You know, you could make your own records, you could press your own singles. You know, that was a realisation that people didn't realise that it was possible. They just thought, you had to sign a deal with a major record label, because the major record labels kind of like made it look like that. They didn't tell you, you can actually just do it yourself.
Totally, man.
But with punk rock, it opened that Pandora's box, you know, and everyone realised that I can do this myself. I don't need to go to... Universal would never sign me, you know what I mean? Like WA would never sign the Buzzcocks in 1976, you know. Yeah. So it was like, they did it themselves. And the motivation was always like to do something, break out of this boredom and monotony, you know. We had glitter music in the 70s to break out of the boredom and monotony of the rest of this kind of like grey rock thing, and it kind of like just this punk rock thing was a similar kind of thing, because it had gone from being glitter to being kind of proggy rocky, kind of like 20-minute guitar solos, triple albums and all this shit, concept records and stuff. and punk just kind of like was an invigorating, youthful kind of generational thing. It's like yes, and it's like yes, and fuck off, you know, and be against this kind of like conformity of the establishment.
Absolutely, you know? There's an
and it was really exciting. It was a really exciting moment. I'm like, you're working, you know, in a hippie record shop that smelled of joss sticks and, you know, had purple wallpaper with stars on it, you know, and working there with a load of guys who all looked like they were Vikings, you know what I mean? And I remember when the Damned record came in the spot. I used to go collect the records because I was the youngest in the shop, so I had to go and get the records from early morning from the railway station. You know, open the box, what's this? The Damned. so just the name just kind of was like, that's pretty good. The Damned, you know, because I was thinking of Village of the Damned. You know, it's pretty dark, you know. Put it on, it was like, what's it? She really going out with him. I was thinking, what's this? A cover version of that shit. Show me that. And then suddenly it's like, it goes into this like new rose, and I was like, wow. Brilliant, you know, and they'd get the guys come to the shop in 9 o'clock and I'm like, you've got to hear this record, and they're like, that's fucking rubbish, that, take it off, you know. And then at that moment, it was like, you don't know what you're listening to, you know. Generation kind of changed, and it opened up so much things. The difference between Berlin, though, was like, people in Britain, people made music to escape, you know, they made music to get out of the boredom of not being able to get a job, or, you know, staying at home, not knowing what to do, you know, with your life, you know. In the past, you went to work and you got an apprenticeship and you went to a factory and you worked in a steelworks or a coal mine or God knows where, you know. And suddenly all these factories had started to close down and people started to become unemployed, and the misery and the kind of like the fear, you know, you're going to be unemployed. Our next door neighbour kind of looked like a mass murderer, you know. It's like really, really kind of scary time. And I felt really privileged. I had a record shop, job in a record shop, you know. But for others, it was kind of very difficult. And so the punk rock thing kind of just gave people the opportunity to kind of like, you didn't have to be a virtuoso, perfect musician. You could just bash out 3 chords and go, I hate you. And, and it was like, then you were, you know, you might get signed, or you might get out of this misery somehow. And at least it froze the boredom, you know. And that was really important. And it kind of changed everybody's mindset. And I think that was really refreshing. And I came to Berlin. And I realised it was all different, because the people here had already escaped to here, and to make the music, they were just expressing themselves and their feelings, and not making music to be like chart hits in the expectation that their music would be number 1 in the hit parade of some kind. They just made music that they felt that they needed to make. And that was really, really refreshing for me. I was like fascinated by it. It was like,
there's also no like pressure coming from above. You know, when you're dealing with record companies and producers in general. But do you think you had that foresight because of your affiliation with Factory Records, or no? Do you think, did you maybe see the way Factory Records were dealing with like New Order and Happy Mondays and Joy Division, and maybe putting them into like a funnel and trying to pop them out as this? I mean, or was that totally not the case?
Well, I knew Tony Wilson before I started Factory, and for example before they started Factory. So, and Rob Gretton, right? I knew these people before that.
Were you just all pals hanging out after?
Well, they'd always come into the shop eventually.
I see, right? Okay.
To buy records. Tony Wilson would come in and go like, "What? You know, save me the best records." You know, he'd always come at the very late before we showed, you know.
So would you show them like The Damned, and they would go, "This is pure shite," or oh yeah, okay.
You know, I was like collecting the music that I thought this is the music that Tony Wilson's got to listen to. Tony Wilson was listening to Emily Harris and Bruce Springsteen, and he was telling me how fantastic Bruce Springsteen was, and I just couldn't get that. I just couldn't understand.
You couldn't get the boss.
I just couldn't get it. I was like, okay, I must be missing something here.
Okay.
I've seen him live, right, and then I still don't get it. Okay. But it was like something that I just could not find an association to. I mean, I come from a sort of science fiction background, and I like synthesizers and it all trippy and kind of trippy, you know. So for me, it was a bit too close to say Bruce Springsteen was a bit too close to Bob Dylan for me.
Yeah, well, Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan don't cry out space travel. You know, it's not really something you would. It's not really something that would be in like a heavy metal soundtrack. Remember that film Heavy Metal, the cartoon? Yeah.
Not really.
No.
So and Tony was kind of like, I wanted to try and, you know, wean him away from that and kind of give him all these different things, all this kind of weird music.
Okay.
So, you know, infiltrate his brain with that. And me, because I was the youngest in the shop, he was interested in what my opinion was, as opposed to the 35-year-old guys of a similar age group to himself were listening to. Yeah. Because he didn't give a shit about Little Feat, and he didn't care about Captain Beefheart. And he was only interested in what the music was that I was listening to, and so it kind of like that was the things that kind of warped his kind of his choices, really, you know. And even though I kind of listened to kind of like electronic music, like, you know, Tangerine Dream or something like that, when the punk thing started, I knew that was really the kind of there's electronic kind of dibbly music. That was my kind of private chill out at home stuff. Working in the shop was more like invigorating people's imagination by saying, look, listen to this. And then I started getting German stuff in because I thought they have to kind of expand a little bit there.
So were you responsible for getting the German stuff in?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And that's I forget the name, Tangerine.
Well, Tangerine Dream. Early Tangerine Dream, like Cyclone and stuff like that. But all the kinds of things, like, you know, Can and things, so, you know, they were already known. Faust was already kind of like introduced. So it was just kind of like just getting all the other weirder ones, you know, all the other strange things like Noi and stuff like that at the time, you know, that kind of like would I just wanted people to kind of expand their vision a little bit musically as opposed to just having one thing. I mean, like, yeah, punk rock is one thing, but there's other things as well. That's also not so conformist as, say, the British pop or the American pop music scene, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you land in Berlin with this, you know, knowledge of synth and kind of like electro, and you're kind of fascinated with this kind of very early punk movement, and then it presumably kind of like grows pretty quickly in Berlin. And but did you start a couple of bands in Berlin? Is Shark Vegas?
Well, Shark Vegas was just a sort of a version of Die Unbekannten, really. So we just added 2 members.
Right, okay. So was that kind of Gleichzeitig? Was that at the same time, or was that before or after?
Well, I started Die Unbekannten first.
Right, okay.
Right, in 81.
Because I was just trying to get my timeline.
And then we were asked by New Order if we'd go on tour with them.
Yeah. Because you supported New Order on the tour,
in 84, yeah.
84, yeah.
And it was like, yeah, we're going on tour, but I want to change the band name because I don't think that people will understand what Die Unbekannten means if we go on tour. And outside of Germany, you know.
And for the, you know, non-German speakers, the unpopulars?
No, Die Unbekannten looks like Die Unbekannten. Unbekannten means unknown. We were called the Unknown.
Yeah,
But we weren't called the Unknown, actually. We were given this name.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
André Schwert, who was a Zitty journalist at the time, and he'd been to see our first gig, and he just wrote 2 unknown Englishmen. He didn't know me, he didn't know who I was, so he just wrote 2 unknown Englishmen, you know, played a very avant-garde set, right?
Yeah.
And from that moment, within our kind of circle of kind of like Berlin scene friends, they would just say, oh, it's the Unbekannten.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so when we came to do this record, it was like, what do we call ourselves? We might as well just call ourselves the Unbekannten, because that's what people always know.
Oh, that's a brilliant piece of trivia right there. That's cool. Because there's some songs that you guys have got from Die Unbekannten that, honestly, man, it could have been released last week. Like Radio War, for example, is the one that springs to mind. It just, when I first listened to it, I was like, oh, that sounds like, I don't know, man. It sounds like as if it could have been by any kind of like, you know, post-punk bands who are kind of like, you know, there's a couple of names that spring to mind, but anyway, it sounds really modern. It's absolutely lasted the test of time. That's for sure.
Really, yeah. I can't evaluate it, to be honest, because I don't really know. So I have to take your word for it.
Why wouldn't you know?
Because it's my own music, and I really don't know how to evaluate my own music in terms of like what other people think of it.
Would you ever just sit down and stick on Die Unbekannten?
No. I have done because I've had to, but only out of force of having to. It took me ages before I actually listened. Record the record, listen to it as I'm doing it. But once it's made into a record, I stop listening to it.
Yeah, it's just out there.
It's done then. It's reached its finality.
Because you can't. No, that does make sense.
I want to go on to the next one.
That does make sense, man. Yeah.
I know.
What was the Unbekannten released on? Like the record?
The label.
Yeah, the label.
The label was called Monogam.
Right. Okay.
Monogam was the record label that Elizabeth Recker started in 1979, and she released the first Neubauten single. She released the first Mania D single, P1A, 49 Second Romance, which I love this record. It was like that was the one record that when I think about 1979, I think of this record.
Okay.
That was like, wow, because it's just electronic.
Okay, cool.
My friend Michel Sharma, who played in Ärtzte, he ended up being in Die Unbekannten for a tour.
So I love this because it just sounds such like an amazing time to start a band in Berlin, man. It really, really does. It's fascinating.
It wasn't intentional.
It was it just happened, but most things in Berlin aren't intentional.
I didn't come to Berlin to be in a band.
No, of course.
Right? And I eventually brought my guitars on from England because I'd been in a band in England, prior to kind of a new wavy band with me and all.
What were they called?
Frantic Elevators.
Frantic Elevators. Right. Okay.
And I was their bass player, founding member. But I didn't come here to sort of be in a band or even. I never even thought about making music, to be honest. I just got here, and then Rob Gretton says, "Oh no, you're here. You can be our promoter for Joy Division." So okay, yeah, so I'll do that. And then it became Factory Records.
Right.
Joy
Okay.
also started Factory Records, and then became their representative.
Yes.
Joy Division might as well do.
That's cool.
The rest of it,
That's cool that you say that, man. Because I was struggling to find the timeline. I didn't know if it was like if you were the kind of representative for Factory Records, and that's why you got Joy Division over. Joy Division you were pals before, and then that yeah.
Well, the concert in Kino of Joy Divisions, that was like, I was trying the minute I got here because the whole idea is like being their promoter was to maybe get them a gig, and I'm trying to thinking where could they play, and then let's go to the Kino, see they've got quite a few sort of new wavy bands on and stuff like this, and the guy doing the concerts, Conchak, I was like, I've got to find out who was doing the concert. And I said, I have some friends in Manchester, this band Joy Division. He's never heard of them. He doesn't give a shit. He's like, no fucking way. and it took them to only when they released Unknown Pleasures, and they got favourable reviews in the music press. And I could take the NME to them and look, they've got an instant review. It's a glowing review. Yeah. It's interesting. I got him a copy of the record. I gave him a copy of the record, and he was like, not bad. Maybe we can do something. And then there was a group of people in Holland who were doing a tour of Joy Division in Holland, and then they got them in touch with each other, and then the gig happened in Berlin. Yeah. And it was like for me I was hoping that this would be the gig which would kind of like make everyone in Germany or at least in Berlin kind of accept this fantastic music and understand this fantastic music. They didn't get it.
There was a bit of a
there's 58 people came to the gig.
But I think I've heard you say before that for Joy Division they were thrilled with this.
Yeah.
They were like, "Hey man, we play for 20-30 people usually, and we want to just come and check out Berlin."
They were just starting in the UK to gain a larger following. Actually, just in that year, 1980, they just managed to start expanding their audiences a little bit. But they were kind of sort of used to playing in front of like 10 people. Berlin and being a bit edgy as well, like Berlin, the audience was very kind of suspicious and kind of like a bit kind of like cold, like because the first single that they released, the first 7 An Ideal for Living single was had a picture of like this kind of Hitler Youth drummer boy on the cover, and I think they took it the wrong way, and they were like thinking, what is this band, like where they are the closet Nazis and stuff. So the feeling inside the Kino was a bit kind of crisp and a bit hostile. So I think New Order got off on that a little bit. It was kind of it made it more energetic and a bit more kind of like on the edge. Okay, yeah.
Very interesting, because I think Joy Division, from understanding of it, they were a little bit jarring. Like, was it the Malaria, the band? That was the all girl band, wasn't it? They were kind of from understanding. They were like, well, everyone likes Joy Division. Everyone's so fascinated with Joy Division. They kept on coming into the record shops, Joy Division, Joy Division, and then they were like, we want to do something completely different from that. Again, kind of referring back to what you were saying about this kind of anti-mainstream, anti-establishment. Don't pigeonhole us. We're going to do exactly what we want to do.
Well, the Good Run's band, Mania Deer, when I first got here, got to see them for the first time. I actually went to a gig and then I missed them because I was doing some drinking outside. Right. But the first gig I saw them play, I was like, wow, that's just so different to anything that I'd seen.
Such an interesting sound.
So radically different, purposely breaking all the rules of rock and roll, really, and doing it their way. And I was like, that's great, that's fantastic. They're not virtuosos in their instruments at all. They couldn't keep time half the time. But that was what made it thrilling and kind of exciting. I was like, wow, that's great. That's still totally different. And then, you know, then it became all this kind of interest in Joy Division only came after Ian died. Yeah.
Ian Curtis, 23, yeah.
Yeah, in 1980, and it was like the kind of like interest kind of was generated then through that death, the kind of like the mystique, and then people kind of reading into the lyrics and going like, oh, why didn't we know?
Right.
You know, this kind of like this kind of feeling, you know, of this dystopian dark wave, if you like. But Good Run was like, you know, yeah, they want it to be like that, but we are not like that, you know. And she just did her own thing, and that was really the kind of refreshing kind of part. I'm not like that because I'm from Manchester and I can only make music in one particular way, the way I've grown up, because I grew up with the Beatles and Stones and stuff, you know, and so I've got that ingrained into me. So the Unbekannten, in our kind of like attempts to try and be kind of avant-garde and whatever, we're only avant-garde because we were crap. We couldn't play, you know. So our avant-garde set.
I by the way, beg to differ. I do not think that they're crap.
Our avant-garde set that Andre Schweert saw was only because like being completely drugged up and drunk. I switched the drum machine on the wrong pattern and it was playing some kind of like bossa nova. And I'm like, what the hell's this? We didn't rehearse to this, you know. We'd only rehearsed like 3 days before in my bedroom, you know, in my flat, you know. And Alistair had never played bass before, and I showed him how to play bass, and he was singing and playing bass at the same time. So it's like this kind of shambolic gig that we did was kind of like not really intentional, but it kind of moulded itself to this kind of avant-garde, anti-establishment kind of music, right? Because it was so shambolic. But when we actually came to do the actual record, the Unbekannten record, I wanted it to be perfect, you know. I wanted it to be something that people would want to listen to. They didn't, of course.
Well, you know, it's just so refreshing. I think it's very refreshing for me as a creative person when I hear little stories like that. So I hear like yourself going, yeah, like I wanted it to be this and like no one bought it, or Joy Division performing in front of 20-30 people. It's just, it gives you such a lease of life, because for a lot of the time you go, it's not about mainstream, it's not about you know, how many albums you sell, or sometimes it really genuinely is just for the sake of getting it done.
Yeah,
you know,
I've never kind of pursued that. I've got a lot of friends who are pop stars, you know, who are pop stars, like stars, if you're well-known artists, you know, Mick Hucknall and Bernard Sumner.
Yeah. By the way, okay, that actually, now I remember your first band. Mick Hucknall was the lead singer, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like they wanted that, you know. They would chase that. I never chased that. That wasn't really the thing that interested me about music and making music. It was like I just like making music, and enjoy it. And if anybody wants to listen to it, then I'm very happy. If they don't, they don't. You know, it's never been kind of a motivator, you know, to have a Porsche or something like that. You know, I mean, like all this kind of like glingy kind of like what rappers are like. You know, wanting to have like gold chains and swimming pools. You know? That's never been the thing that's driven me musically as such. You know, I've never been so ambitious. So for me to actually start making music, it wasn't kind of this drive to be famous or anything like that. You know, I'd like to be behind the curtains. You know,
still definitely much a part of it, but behind the scene. I mean, you know, that's a kind of nice, you know, a nice segue into, you know, I want, one of the things I actually wanted to ask you was, you were very much an instigator of taking the punk, the literal physicality of punk music from the west to the east, right? Do you think that do you realise that you're like a huge factor in the punk movement in Berlin? Do you consider yourself that? Yeah. There's like, because in the east, right? So you're smuggling cassettes over the border, and you're like, you know, you're in Berlin, you're in West Berlin, you want to go over to East Berlin, you managed to go over to East Berlin, you're taking some cassettes and stuff. People are listening to this and going, we want more. What the fuck is this?
Yeah,
even?
of course, yeah.
We want more. Yeah. And then you start actually physically taking bands from the west to the east. And that is like a huge thing to do. I mean, that must have been a catalyst, you know.
Well, initially, there wasn't, the punk scene, evolving punk scene in East Berlin, officially didn't exist, of course. You know, it was forbidden in a sense to be a punk, to express yourself in such a way. Right?
Uh-huh.
So having this, I just wanted to tape my record collection really for my friends in these, because I knew they couldn't go to a record shop and buy the records I was listening to, and you can tell someone about a record how brilliant it is and stuff like that. They're going to listen to the radio and they're never going to hear it. It's never going to get played on the radio. So the kind of music that I wanted them to hear, it's like I knew that they would never be able to get it any other way unless I gave it to them, because they couldn't come and get it. So I started to put music onto cassettes, my favourite tracks and stuff, and then favourite records and stuff, and I was thinking, just bring it to my friends and let them hear it. Yeah. And they can evaluate it. And actually, I never wrote on any of the cassettes the track lists, right? I just left them just blank, always, right?
Why?
Because I wanted them to hear the music without knowing who it was who played the music.
Okay.
Because that way they would be able to evaluate the music on its merits as being a piece of music and not on who it is. Mm-hmm. Because I think that if you know it, if they know in advance this is by the Toten Hosen, obviously they sing in German, but if they know in advance, either they might have an opinion of that band, of what their music sounds like, or what they are as people maybe like. They might
true.
And it kind
even
of
through a title,
warps your sense of perception in a way. It's a bit of an indoctrination if you know already, you've heard about or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I thought, by not knowing what it is, not knowing how it sounds, they can only listen to it and say, I like that track. It does something to me. And that's the way I kind of manipulated these kids into tuning their ears to the sounds of the, whether it be Donna Summer, I Feel Love, or if it's, Sex Pistols record or whatever. Mm-hmm. The difference is that if they've never heard it on the radio, they've never heard anything, then they can't kind of automatically sort of say, oh, it's this. So I thought they'll just listen to it and take it in like that way. And then later on, I was going to actually do a gig with myself with Die Unbekannten in East Berlin, but no one could get all the synthesizers and drum machines and stuff. And
you were going to do it in the East?
Yeah. I'd already, the previous year in 1982, I'd already done a secret gig in Czechoslovakia. For some dissident friends that I'd met by chance, and we played in this kind of Alamo farmhouse thing in the middle of nowhere in Bohemia, and we did this secret gig, and it was like wow, what is this? We didn't realise at the time that it was the first time that a Western band had ever done anything remotely like this.
I mean, how do you set that up? In the East, did they have synthesizers?
No,
cables and shit like what?
I took a cassette of drum patterns and sequences and stuff.
That's amazing.
Right? Smuggled the cassette in to East German borders, then into Czechoslovakia, and then we used that as a backing track, because we didn't have any drum machines and synths and stuff, and then we played on these kind of Czech guitars, a Jorlana bass.
Right. Okay.
It was brilliant actually, and it was total mayhem, and that kind of it was like, so it is possible to do these kind of things, and I was thinking, I wonder if it'd ever be possible in kind of Stalinstadt, like this East Germany, and then by pure chance, I was in a pub with my mates, in some bar in East Berlin with my mates having a drink, and this guy was sitting at the end of the table, this hippie guy, and he's listening to our conversation, and he was eventually curiosity got the best of him, and he goes, "You're not from here," and I'm like, "No, I'm from England." And he's like, frozen, wow, England, it's like, just he'd never met anyone from England before, never ever thought he'd ever meet anyone from England, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And then we started talking, and all he wanted to do was talk about music, that's all. And he told me about this church in Rummelsburg where he played this blues mass, and I was like, what is that? And he explained in very great detail what it is to be a musician in East Germany, how you need to have a permit to own a guitar, you need a permit to be able to play, and all these things. So I had to go through all these kind of talent shows in front of these blokes in brown suits who were kind of watching you. You know, they're all guys from like the Bowen Collective or something, or some like miners and fucking steel workers and stuff. And they're watching you playing. They're evaluating your potential. You know, have you got star allure, and can you play your instrument? You know, before you get your piece of paper that tells you can own a guitar. You know, so this guy's telling me these special gigs that he does in the church, because the church is like a sanctuary. It's kind of like outside of the kind of jurisdiction of outside of the church. East Germany, you can do these blues masses and all your players like Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton. I'm thinking, I thought, where is that again? And he's like Rummelsburg. So I said to my friends, like, we should go and check out what this is priest, if we can do something there. Maybe Die Unbekannten can play there. So he goes, we do these blues masses, and I'm like, what about, can I play there? And he's like, where's the stage? Is it like the gig? You know, like, he's like, this is not a gig, it's a church service with prayers. You know, like, you've got to do that, you know. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do everything. You know. but
so you just be sitting there, get your Hail Marys
prayers before and after, something. You know, thank you. You know, I'm not religious, but I thought I'll do everything. You know, just anything to do this gig. You know.
Okay.
But we couldn't get any. There was no electricity, no electronic instruments of any kind that were available, you know, and no one wanted to give us the cassette player, right? Because they were saying that no way, if the police raid this gig, you know, then they'll confiscate the cassette player, and the cassette player in East Germany was like something very holy.
Yeah, no doubt.
Without like you don't have any music, you know, so they wouldn't let us have the cassette player. So I'm like, okay, so we'll have to think of something else. And then eventually I just decided, like, I'm on tour with Toten, and I'm thinking, like, maybe they're better anyway, because they all know their songs, they can speak German, they understand it, you know. And so I said to Toten, well, if next time we do a gig in Berlin, can we do a secret gig in East Berlin?
What did they say to that?
And they were like, oh yeah. They didn't realise just what it meant, right? And actually we didn't realise either what it meant, but my friends, two girls who helped us to do this concert. Right? I said to them, you know, right, if we do this gig, if we get caught, your lives will change forever. I'll just get kicked out of the country, but your lives will change forever. So do you want to do this or not? And they were like, yeah. So I was like, okay. So we set it up, and we did this gig, and it was like 30 people, very intimate. But we didn't realise it just kind of electrified the whole East German little punk scenes. Because in each city there was a few handfuls of smitterings of punks, you know.
Yeah.
The knowledge that we'd actually come over and we'd actually done this gig, and we'd kind of broken all the kind of real rules and regulations every way shape possible, you know. That kind of was like electrification for these kids, and they all went to their local churches and said, "Could we do a blues mass?" And so the churches became this kind of like punk rock sanctuaries.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And that started the whole thing in East Germany. I mean, it wasn't like the whole thing that punk didn't exist. You know, there were small smitterings of punks everywhere, but it kind of gave them the motivation. It gave them the kind of impetus to sort of like, yeah, we can do that too. Yeah, and so on. All these bands suddenly started to appear. You know, we hijacked a punk band, an East German punk band called Planlos. We actually the gig was kind of arranged officially as a blues mass. They were the band that were going to play, and we were just going to be the supporter. We were just going to turn up, you know. So Planlos in the kind of like officialdom world of like what's going to happen next week is blues mass. It's Planlos are going to be playing. That was just merely for the East German authorities, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Planlos were the support act, you know. Oh. We borrowed that one amplifier and the guitars and drums, you know. But like they were the official band. So punk existed. We knew that, you know, there were punk. My friends were punks, you know. We knew this scene existed. There's Scottish houses and stuff in Pennsylvania and stuff. And it was like, the actual doing the gig was the thing which kind of sparked off it revealed itself, just as punk rock had done so in Manchester in 1976.
I mean, that's why I'm kind of like not in the slightest reluctant to say that you were very much a facilitator and getting them in there, exposing that, like expanding that scene and expanding, you know, without being stereotypical, like expanding minds, expanding, the ideas that systems can be kind of broken down. It can be anti-establishment. We don't have to kind of abide by these rules yet. We're covered by Stasi because we have to, so I guess we have to kind of go with the rules, you know. But as soon as that wall came down, man, it was almost like what you had built up in the East, they were gagging for it in the West, and it was almost like they all came running to you, like Mark Reeder, like, right, so where is it all then? You've showed us a couple of cassettes, you've showed us a couple of live things, where is it all, you know?
They came to West Berlin when the wall came down and was like, there's one club, you know, two clubs actually, 90 grad, 90 degrees, and oomph, and that was it. Yeah.
Was the SO 36 not?
Yeah. So, well, no, actually, I think it might have been closed at that point as a concert hall, right, where gigs were happening. Because it was kind of open, close always. So it, was, it might have been closed at the end of that. I can't remember. But some place like the Jungle Club in Nürnberger Strasse, you know, the kind of elitist kind of like place where the scene sort of hung out. You know, they were very West Berlin. You know, it was a very West Berlin-y kind of thing. You know, and all these kids coming over from the East. They wanted to go to the parties that they'd been listening to on the radio, like the kind of techno music that they'd been listening to on the radio. Okay. You know, and there were a few acid house parties, but it was mainly just in, you know, mainly the two clubs were 90 grad and UFO, you know, and it was like there wasn't much else, you know, and these kids, just because of the way radio worked in East Germany as this kind of official kind of thing, they heard these radio shows in the West equally. Like from Monica Dietl or Barry Graves, they were like, they play Western club music, and like, where can I listen to that? You know, where can I hear that? Okay. And so when they came to West Berlin, there wasn't anything really. It wasn't real. The UFO was a tiny club, you know.
Well, isn't that kind of where like why this kind of raver culture exploded, or the dance culture, or the trance culture, which then became techno? If I'm
no, the other way around.
Other way around.
Techno existed in America really before it came here, you know.
One of the things that struck me was how universal techno or trance was, that it didn't have lyrics, everyone could understand it, because
that's the key.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, because a lot of Visties they didn't know a lot of English, or they couldn't really understand it that well, and that's what kind of like exploded this huge scene in the early 90s in Berlin.
Well, that as well, and the fact that you know, the way the parties were structured, and the fact that most of these kids had never taken drugs before, and they got, you know, first time taking ecstasy, whatever,
or cheap speed, or
you know what I mean? Well, it was mainly just ecstasy.
Okay.
Yeah, like that was the dancing tablets, you know. It was like that was the drug of that moment. It was like it was fairly new to Berlin, to be honest, you know. In the past, in the sort of like mid late 80s acid house times, it was dead expensive. Yeah, it was dead expensive. And but then it started to be manufactured within Europe someplace, you know, and then it was like suddenly there it was available, and it just kind of just gave people, you know, they've been in East Berlin, they've never done drugs. It's like suddenly here's this opportunity to go to this party and experience everything that you'd never been able to experience before because the state wouldn't allow you. Now you could do everything, and even in the places most of the time there was no jurisdiction of any kind, because the death strip between East and West, so there's no police, you know, so they didn't care. So free abandon, freeness, you know, it's like, wow, I'm going to try it. And, you know, you go in a club and everybody's on the same drug. Everybody's dancing to the same music. And it was just this one kind of symbiosis of people, you know, like, wow, you know, that's what unification is about. It didn't matter where you're from. It didn't matter what you look like. It didn't matter how much money you earned in a year. It didn't matter what kind of job you had, your status, your position, or anything. It didn't matter anything, because together on the dance floor, in that moment, you were unified together with the music, and the drug kind of just enabled took away all those inhibitions and fears and stuff, and made you love each other. And you know, that was the moment where I can say in my life I've touched and tasted what real freedom is like, and I'd like to have it back ASAP, please. because it was a feeling of, you know, the Cold War had been lifted, this kind of threat of nuclear annihilation had been lifted off our shoulders, this thing about East and West and kind of bitching about each other. It all ended, it all became irrelevant, and that was really a really pinnacle of like really my life at that moment. It was like, wow, this is like, you know, you go through the whole Cold War thing and this East-West thing and do all these illegal stuff, but to actually have that feeling of winning something, you know, winning the Cold War, that was and then celebrated it by everybody together on the dance floor. That was something really special, you know.
It will always amaze me how, you know, it's there's a very small minority of people who are always in power that have the differences. It's not the people that have the differences. The people just want to get along and dance with each other and talk to each other and share ideas and share cultural experiences of all forms of fashion. And then you've got these people at the top who are like, build the Iron Curtain, get a wall, do these things, get these things in place.
They have a deficit, these people, because they are very self-centered. Although they kind of project this kind of, I'm going to do this for the people, you know. That's the spiel, really. That's just the carrot.
That's
you know?
the...
It's
yeah,
like, I am... Yeah, but in reality, right, they have a self-centered ambition to be powerful.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's this Machiavellian thing. I want to have absolute power.
Totally.
As much as I possibly can. And I'm fearful of anybody who's going to shake me out of this power, you know, my privilege and all these things. And it's a deficit that they lack. They have creativity in a different way, you know. They have a creativity in maintaining their power base or whatever. But in reality, they have this creativity as an artist has. They don't have that really.
They really don't.
I mean, some do. I mean, Churchill could paint and everything. You know, he had a build.
So could Hitler.
But, you know, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, 2 coats and it was done within a day. But you know what I mean? It's like it's another kind of the artistic in a different way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not the whether you could paint, draw, play music or whatever. It's like they have a different kind of ambition, I think, and the ambition is to drive themselves to have as much power as possible and as much decision as possible. And I think that you know, our world could be such an easier place to be if we all kind of like evened everything out.
Oh,
you travel around the world and you see places like, you know, Colombia or, you know, or even in China or whatever, you know, Asia, someplace, you know, and you see the differences in our kind of lives and stuff, and what we have and what they don't have and stuff, and you think, you know, every single country spends so many millions or trillions or whatever on building some kind of weapons of protection and defence and stuff. And you think, like, God, you know, you've just built a nuclear submarine for £1 trillion or whatever. You know, that money could have gone. That could have done something else. You know, you could have made people drinking. You know, all these people whose lives in Africa or whatever are they're so desperate that they feel that they have to come to Europe to kind of like escape. They don't want to come in, really.
No.
You know? They feel that it's a necessity to come in. They have to. It's like live or die, you know.
Well, that's it.
And I've got war, because war is about resources, you know, getting power over water, getting power over minerals and all that, you know. And it's all about greed and power again, you know. And so the resources are what are the keys to these kind of war things. And it's like, you stop them from having them, and they're going to do these things.
Well, that's it, mate. Like I was watching. I just want to check the battery for 2 seconds here, just so that I don't want to like. It won't actually tell me. Doesn't matter if that cuts off. I've got a backup. I was reading this article the other day that was saying, you know, we in the West, we refer to developing countries or third world countries as poor. They're not poor. They're rich. They're rich in minerals, they're rich in aluminium, metals, water, copper, all the things that we want. And the reason they're poor is because we've made them poor. And that really struck a chord with me, man. I was like, wow, like these places are still culturally rich, traditionally rich. They're thousands of years older than what like the States are. You know, a lot of our kind of modern worlds and stuff. It's weird.
It is, and it's like as our kind of like in the 2020s now, you know, as we kind of develop, it's like, what phase are we in? If we look at, you know, I love history, so I kind of get engrossed in kind of like ancient history and modern history, and I see like, you know, the parallels of our 20th century. What things happened then what was the kind of like the ball that knocked the other ball kind of thing, right? And it's like you're looking and saying, this and this happened, and it ended up being like this. So how you know, you have to be aware of how those things still will occur in our 21st century,
Yeah.
because you can see the same parallels and the same we're creatures of habit.
Well, that's right.
Right?
Things are
We're creatures of habit. So it's like, we did it 21st.
Things are repetitive.
We can do a 21st century version of the 20th century.
Yeah.
We might be a little bit different, but it's basically the same thing. So it's like, watch what goes on and watch how things develop.
Learn from our experiences.
Well, that's the idea, isn't it?
That's the idea. It would be ideal if we could somehow do that.
Yeah.
Listen, man. We're kind of slowly nearing the end. Before things close down. But there is one question I wanted to ask you. Just if you've got any kind of highlights, like at any kind of major moments in your entire life, or specifically to make it easier through your career. Because there's man, I could sit here and talk to you for another 3 hours, man, about Paul Van Dyk or Paul Van Dyk, and all your kind of remixes and how I'm really interested. Maybe we can do a part 2 one day of the kind of jump from punk and east west and the rise of techno, and then you start producing loads of people. You get your own record label and stuff. MFS, yeah. But I kind of just wanted to, before we tie this up, man, ask you if you've any kind of highlights of your career that you'd like to kind of reminisce on.
Highlights. Well, coming to Berlin was a highlight for sure.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was definitely an eye opener.
That was definitely a pivotal.
And the fact that I missed the fall of the Berlin Wall was another one.
Oh, you missed it?
Yeah, I left the night before.
Why? Where were you?
Well, I'd been producing a record in East Berlin for about 6 months or something, for far too long. And when we finished recording, I decided I'd go with some English friends. We're going on a trip to Romania. And we're going on a road trip travelling through Poland and Czechoslovakia down to Hungary into Romania. Mm-hmm. And so we left the night before. And we didn't even know until that.
Oh, no way.
A week later. Yeah.
Oh, really? Crazy.
So that was quite a highlight. Coming back to a totally different city. The city we left, West Berlin, didn't exist when we came back. It evaporated into sort of like east and west and just amalgamated suddenly. So we returned to a city which was different to the one we'd left.
Right.
That was a definite highlight. I mean, I've had different things. I mean, like going, travelling with B-Movie around China, that was quite a highlight.
That's something I also wanted to touch on, by the way. There's going to be loads of links to all the things that we've talked about, including links to like malaria and Toten, Hosen and Die Unbekannten, and also a link to B-Movie, which was a great success, man. When was that made?
2015.
2015, right?
Well,
yeah.
it was made actually. It started in 2011, but we released in 2015.
These things take so long, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you were touring in China with that, kind of promoting that, doing talks, and then like DJ stuff afterwards. When was that?
That was in 2017.
2017, right? So you're hoping all that's going to like pick back up again and stuff.
Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, it definitely, hopefully, will. Somebody has still not seen that film in some parts of the world, so
you want them to see it.
They should see it, because it's a kind of a way to look into how you could do, possibly things in the future.
Yeah.
It's like an insight into what we did in the past, but at the same time, kind of hopefully inspires people to take their own initiative and do it yourself.
Do you still believe that Berlin is a good place to be for creatives? It's still kind of authentic and unique and cheap and kind of free thinking.
Cheap it's not, but
yeah, it's kind of increased, that's for sure.
But what do you expect? That's the price of capitalism. It's the fact is that we knew that was going to happen in 1990 when the wall came down.
Yeah,
this is it now. Cheap rents are over, sort of thing. It's taken a while, but the thing is about Berlin is that it still attracts the same type of people to this city, which is important. We had a very, very creative period, and the fact that all the clubs are closed and everything like that. Still, what happens afterwards? Berlin will still attract the same kind of people, because let's face it, we're probably one of the most, if not the most liberal city in the world. It's like you go everywhere else and you don't find quite so open-minded, the people being so open-minded here. And I think that the more of the kind of people who feel kind of like in their village somewhere being finger pointed at and saying, no, not you, you can come to Berlin and you can meet everybody who's been in the similar sort of situations yourself. So you feel a kind of unity with everybody, and I think that is really important. And the fact that the support of the city for artists has been quite good compared to other places as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
And I think that we have finally they kind of understand that the city needs us entertainers around the place, because that's what the city the image outside the outside world is that, and we don't really have anything else other than entertainment. The amount of money that entertainment draws into the city, whether it be opera or whether it be stand-up comedy or whether it be bands or DJs, just the clubbing part of it, in 2018 or so, generated 1.4 billion euro, just the clubbing.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And so, that's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
For a city.
Yeah.
Just for the clubbing.
Yeah.
Then you think about all the other parts, all the other entertainment that goes hand in hand with that. Theatre, opera, whatever. And that in itself, as it generates enough with the museums and everything, and then they've got a very nice city and all the rest of it. Like Berlin is a very entertaining place.
Let's keep it that way, man. I'm hoping this has been just as entertaining as what the city of Berlin can offer. I mean, this is it. This is the epitome right here. Me and Mark Reader.
Thank you.
Should we do a little cheers on the Wandering Barman mugs, which are available at your... Yes.
Tastes fantastic.
I'll let you have one of those. You can take that cup home with you if you like.
Wonderful. I will.
Mark, man, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
You're very welcome, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you again. Bye.
Excuse me, where can I get myself a drink?